She had no idea what she was walking into. Emily Parker stood in the hallway of the Santoro mansion, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted her apron. She wasn't supposed to be here, not in this situation. A maid, low in rank, nothing more than a servant in the eyes of the family. But today, she found herself in the middle of a storm. The dinner party was lively, laughter echoing through the grand rooms. But underneath the surface, tension simmered. Olivia Santoro, the matriarch, had just been insulted by one of the family's guests, a minor issue at first, but then it escalated. As the argument grew heated, Emily stood by the door, unsure of how to react. The next thing she knew, Olivia's dignity was about to be torn apart, and she couldn't let that happen. Without thinking, Emily stepped forward, blocking the slap aimed at Olivia. The room fell silent, every eye now on her. Emily could feel the weight of the stairs, but her mind was elsewhere, on the intimidating figure that had just entered the room. Dominic Santoro, the Mafia boss himself, stood in the doorway, his cold eyes scanning the scene. His reputation for cruelty was well known, but his response to the situation was unlike anything she expected. Instead of anger, there was a quiet intensity, an unreadable expression that sent a shiver down her spine. Enough! Dominic's voice cut through the silence, soft yet commanding. The tension in the room thickened. What was he thinking? And more importantly, what would he do next? Emily could feel her heart pounding in her chest as Dominic's gaze fixed on her. The room remained deathly silent, the weight of his stare almost unbearable. She stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. His reputation as a ruthless mafia boss was well known, yet here he was, watching her as if weighing her every move. She could almost hear the whispers in the air, the guests, the servants, all of them waiting for him to speak. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever. Finally, Dominic spoke, his voice low and calm. "You've done well," he said, his words cutting through the tension like a knife. Emily blinked, momentarily stunned by his unexpected response. She had braced herself for anger, for a punishment, but instead, there was an air of quiet respect. Olivia, standing beside her, seemed just as confused, her expression unreadable. Emily glanced at her, wondering if she had ever seen this side of Dominic before. As if sensing her thoughts, Dominic's eyes shifted to Olivia, then back to Emily. "No one harms my family," he added, his voice unwavering. The room remained still, but the air had shifted. Something had changed, and Emily wasn't sure if it was for better or worse. The power in the room, once oppressive, now felt like a force she couldn't escape. As the moments stretched on, Emily couldn't help but feel the weight of Dominic's presence. His words had left her stunned, but the silence that followed was even more unnerving. Everyone in the room seemed to be holding their breath, waiting for the next move, for the next command. Dominic didn't speak again, but his eyes never left her, studying her with an intensity that sent a chill down her spine. Emily had always known that working for the Santoro family meant living in the shadows, serving with obedience, but now, standing in front of the most powerful man in the room, she realized just how dangerous those shadows could be. A slight movement from Dominic broke the silence. He motioned for her to follow him, his calm demeanor almost masking the authority in his voice. Without thinking, Emily took a step forward, her heart racing. As they moved toward the private sitting room, she couldn't shake the feeling that this moment, this unexpected act of courage, would change everything. What did he want from her? And more importantly, what would happen to her now? Was her fate sealed, or had she just entered a world where the lines between loyalty and survival were blurred beyond recognition? Emily followed Dominic into the private sitting room, her footsteps tentative, as if every step closer to him meant stepping further into a world she couldn't control. The door clicked shut behind them, sealing them into quiet. The room was dimly lit, the only light coming from the soft glow of a fireplace in the corner. Dominic moved to the large leather chair by the fire, his movements slow, deliberate. He gestured for her to sit across from him. Emily hesitated, unsure whether to sit or stand, but finally settled into the chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Dominic studied her in silence for a moment, his expression unreadable. "You acted out of turn," he said finally, his voice calm but firm. "But that's not always a bad thing." Emily's breath caught in her throat. Was he angry? Pleased? She couldn't tell. His gaze softened ever so slightly as he continued. You're loyal. I can respect that. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Dominic leaned forward, his eyes never leaving hers. But loyalty can be dangerous, especially when it's misplaced. Emily swallowed hard, her mind racing. What was he trying to say? Was he warning her, or was he offering something more? The tension in the room was palpable, and Emily realized that her actions, her place in this family, could change in an instant. She had stepped into a world where even the smallest misstep could cost her everything. Dominic's gaze remained steady, almost like he was reading her every thought. The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken words. Emily shifted uncomfortably in her seat, trying to steady her racing heart. What do you want from me? She finally asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. Dominic didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, the firelight casting shadows across his sharp features. I want to see if you're truly capable of handling this, he said, his voice low and controlled. The world you've stepped into isn't one of simple rules. It's a world where everything you do has consequences, and every choice you make will affect not only you, but those around you. Emily swallowed, her mind racing as she processed his words. She had known the Santoro family was powerful, but hearing it from Dominic himself made the reality hit harder. I didn't ask for this, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Dominic's lips curled into a slight smile, though there was no warmth in it. None of us do. But once you're in, there's no easy way out. His words hung in the air, a chilling reminder of the life she had just stepped into. Emily realized then that this wasn't just a job, and Dominic wasn't just a boss. He was the kind of man whose actions could change her life forever, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for that kind of power. But as the fire crackled softly beside them, she knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same. Again, Emily's mind was racing, her thoughts tangled in confusion and uncertainty. She had come to the Santoro mansion expecting nothing more than to serve, to stay in the background as she always had. But now, in this room with Dominic, everything felt different. The weight of his words hung in the air, pressing down on her like a storm that had just begun to form. She had no choice but to face it. Dominic was right about one thing. There was no easy way out. Once she stepped into this world, it would change her forever. But she wasn't ready. Not for the pressure, not for the darkness that seemed to seep into every corner of the Santoro empire. The silence between them felt suffocating. Emily could barely meet his gaze, but when she finally did, she saw something in Dominic's eyes, a flicker of something almost human, something that made her hesitate. You don't have to be afraid, he said softly, his tone gentler now, almost reassuring. I'm not asking for blind loyalty. I'm asking for your trust. And in return, I'll protect you. But you have to decide if you're willing to take that step. Emily's heart skipped a beat. His words weren't the threats she had expected. Instead, they were an invitation into a world she couldn't quite understand, but knew she couldn't turn away from either. The decision felt impossibly heavy. Could she trust him? Could she trust herself in this world where loyalty and survival were everything? The weight of Dominic's words lingered in the air, and Emily found herself at a crossroads, unable to ignore the pull of uncertainty that gripped her heart. Trust. It sounded so simple, yet it felt like an impossible choice. Dominic's voice softened, almost as if he were trying to reassure her, but Emily's thoughts remained tangled in confusion. How could she trust someone like him? Someone who lived in a world of power and danger, where everything seemed like a transaction. But his eyes, so focused, so steady, made her question everything she thought she knew. You'll have my protection, he said again, leaning forward slightly, his gaze never wavering. But in return, you need to be strong. This world, it isn't kind to those who falter. Emily's breath caught in her throat. What did that mean for her? Could she survive in this world of shadows, where the lines between right and wrong blurred with every decision? A part of her wanted to refuse, to walk away, but the pull of something deeper, something she couldn't explain, held her back. I can't promise I won't make mistakes, she whispered, more to herself than to him. Dominic's expression softened, and for a brief moment, Emily saw something beyond the cold, calculating Mafia boss. Something human. Mistakes are a part of it. The question is, how do you learn from them? His words echoed in her mind. challenging her to think beyond fear and doubt. She realized then that her choice wasn't just about survival. It was about becoming someone she had yet to understand. And with Dominic's eyes still on her, Emily felt the first stirrings of something new inside her, a resolve she hadn't known she had. The silence between them stretched, but this time, it wasn't oppressive. It was different, charged, almost as if something had shifted. Emily could feel it in the air, thick with the unspoken understanding that had just passed between them. Dominic wasn't asking her to be perfect. He was asking her to step into a world she hadn't yet understood, but one she was now bound to. His words, though cold and calculated, had a way of sinking into her mind, making her rethink everything she had ever known. She glanced at him again, unsure of what to make of his presence. He was the same man who controlled everything in his path, yet in this moment, there was something almost reassuring about his quiet confidence. "I don't expect you to be like the others," he continued, his voice still steady, but with a slight softness that surprised her. "You're different, and that's what makes you valuable." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had always been the invisible one, the one who blended into the background. But here, with Dominic, her presence was noticed, even if it wasn't entirely clear whether that would be a blessing or a curse. She opened her mouth to speak, but found herself at a loss for words. What could she possibly say? "I'll do what I can," she said finally, her voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling inside her. Dominic's lips curved into a small, almost imperceptible smile. "That's all I ask," he replied, and for the first time since their conversation began, Emily felt a glimmer of hope. That maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as powerless as she had once believed. Emily stood there for a moment, trying to grasp the full weight of what Dominic had said. His words had planted a seed of doubt in her mind, but also a strange sense of purpose. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time since stepping into this mansion, she felt as if she had a role to play. Dominic wasn't just a ruthless mafia boss. He was a man who saw something in her, a strength she had yet to tap into. As she left the sitting room, her thoughts were clearer than before. The world she was in now was one of constant decisions, where every action had the potential to change everything. Emily's resolve hardened as she walked down the hallway, passing the grand portraits of the Santoro ancestors. Her place here was still uncertain, but she knew one thing. She couldn't afford to be invisible anymore. She would have to step up, learn the rules of this game, and navigate the shadows that surrounded her. Dominic had offered his protection, but the more she thought about it, the more she realized that protection came with a price she would have to pay with every choice she made. As the door to her room closed behind her, Emily took a deep breath, ready to face whatever came next, knowing that this was only the beginning of her new life.